I used to believe that if you gave your children everything, your time, your trust, your quiet sacrifices, they'd grow up knowing how to give that back, in some small way. I thought I'd raised my son to see people before money. But life has a cruel way of peeling back illusions. I'm Dorothy. Most people around here call me Dot. I'm 67 years old, widowed for nearly 12 years now. I worked over 4 decades as a school librarian, the kind with thick glasses, alphabetized spices, and a biscuit tin always filled for the neighborhood kids. I wasn't rich, but I was steady, careful. I counted pennies when others weren't looking, never spent on vacations, never bought anything full price unless it was a gift. I built a small retirement fund that way, bit by bit. Coupons, savings bonds, second-hand clothes, a car that rattled but ran, and no air conditioning during summer months. That fund was supposed to be for medical emergencies, or maybe a senior community down the line. Not trips, not luxuries, not betrayal. David, my son, was always charming. He got that from his father. Tall, with an easy laugh, and a way of making you believe he cared deeply about what you were saying. He married Mandy when he was 27. She was sharp and opinionated, always chasing the next big thing. Better houses, better cars, better schools for their kids. On the outside, they looked like a successful family. On the inside, I was beginning to see cracks. David started visiting less, but the requests for help came more often. A couple hundred for this, an early loan for that. Just until next payday, Mum. And I always said yes, because isn't that what we do? Even when my back ached and my knees protested, I made sure I was available. I sewed costumes for their kids' plays. I babysat when they had conferences. I never said no. Not once. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, just a week before this all began, David showed up at my door. No call beforehand. Just knocked and stood there, looking a little flushed and a lot uncomfortable. "Mandy and I are taking the kids on vacation," he said, stepping inside. "We've been planning this for years." I smiled. "That sounds lovely. You all deserve a break." He hesitated. "Well, we hit a bit of a snag. The resort required full payment up front, and the bank froze one of our cards because of a transaction mistake last month." That's when he started explaining how they needed a temporary solution. My backup card, tied to my retirement savings, wasn't something I gave out freely. In fact, I'd only used it myself a handful of times. But David knew about it, and he asked just for a week, only for the hotel and maybe the flights. He swore he'd repay it the minute they returned. I could hear Mandy's voice in the background on speakerphone, nudging him. She always helps. "Just ask Dave." I paused. My gut felt tight, but I swallowed it. "Fine," I said. "Just don't go overboard." He grinned like a boy again. Hugged me. "You won't regret it, Mom." But I did, not just for the money, but for letting myself believe I still mattered to them beyond my utility. That night, I sat in my small kitchen, staring at the card on the counter. I didn't even want to touch it. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, wondering what kind of vacation they were planning. Maybe some budget resort. Maybe a trip to the mountains. I didn't know that by the next morning, the charges would start rolling in, and each swipe would feel like a slap to the face. I didn't know then that my name wasn't just helping pay for their vacation. It was their vacation. And they never intended for me to know the full truth. 3 days. That's how long it took for my stomach to knot. At first, I told myself not to worry. Maybe they were just busy, enjoying their vacation, focused on the kids, soaking up sun somewhere along the coast. I'd sent a little message to David just to check in. Hope the kids are enjoying the beach. Let me know if everything's okay. No reply. The next morning, I logged into my online banking account to take a look, just to be sure everything was under control. I don't know what I expected. A few hotel charges, maybe a plane ticket or two. Instead, the screen filled with transaction after transaction, rolling in like waves I never saw coming. $2,137, boutique hotel in Cancun, $489, airport lounge passes $860, fine dining at something called El Mar de Cristal, $3,120, jewelry purchase $300, wine tasting tour, $1,400. First-class upgrade on the return flight, my heart sank. Not just because of the numbers, but because it was all in my name. Every booking, every reservation. The hotel receipt was emailed directly to my inbox, and there, in black and white letters, reservation under Dorothy McKinley. I stared at the screen in silence, the cursor blinking at me like it was mocking how foolish I'd been. They didn't just use my card. They used me, my name, my identity, my years of saving, my care. And they weren't even hiding it. Not a single update. Not a thank you. Not even a, "Hey, Mom, we're using your name for the booking. Hope that's okay." They'd just taken it, like it belonged to them. I called the bank. A young man answered, too cheerful for the hour. I asked him about the charges, and he kindly explained that since the card was issued in my name and I hadn't reported it stolen, I'd be liable for all usage unless I could prove fraud. "But I didn't authorize half of these," I said quietly. "They said it was just the hotel." He hesitated. "I understand, ma'am. But since it was given voluntarily and not reported until now..." His voice faded into protocol and disclaimers. I stopped listening after that. What do you say when you realize your own child didn't even consider how this might impact you? It wasn't just money, it was trust. And it was being taken for a fool at an age when you're supposed to be cared for, not used. That evening, I tried again. Texted David one more time. "David, can you please call me when you get a moment? I need to talk to you about the card." Hours passed. Nothing. So I opened the bank portal again. Another charge. $249. Sunset Catamaran Experience. They were sailing on my retirement, laughing, drinking cocktails, taking selfies on a boat, while I sat in a quiet house with a leaky faucet and a half-used tea bag. And the cruelest part? I knew he wouldn't have told me if the card was maxed out. I would have just seen the overdraft notice in the mail weeks later. My hand trembled when I reached for my planner. Inside was a sticky note, carefully written in my own handwriting from years ago. "You are allowed to say no, even to family." I'd written that after reading a column about boundaries. I remember it made me cry. But I never followed it. Until now. I was raised to believe that family came before everything. But I've learned, too late, that family who only sees you as a wallet isn't family. It's liability dressed in familiarity. And liability can cost you everything if you let it go unchecked. So I made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to do something I'd never done before. Take control, not with rage, not with yelling, but with silence and a few clicks of a button. And next time they tried to use me, they'd have to explain it to someone with a badge. The next morning started like any other, quiet, still, and lonely. I made oatmeal with brown sugar and sliced half a banana, sat by the window and watched the wind stir the leaves. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was cold, not cruel. just done. I decided to send a little package to the kids, my grandbabies, just a few trinkets, some candy from our local general store, a beach-themed puzzle, and 2 postcards that read, "Wish you were here," even though I wasn't the one on vacation. I wanted them to remember me as something more than a bank account or a burden. I still believed there was goodness in them, because they were still young. Maybe they could grow into better people than their parents. I called my neighbor Gladys, who still drove, and she helped me take the package to the post office. We stood in line for a while, chatting about the weather and the school board's latest drama. Normal things. It felt good to just be Dot for a moment. Not Mom, not the woman they were draining, not the widow behind the money. When I got home, I texted Mandy to ask for the hotel's full address, just so the package wouldn't get lost. I wish she hadn't responded. I wish I could have held on to the benefit of the doubt just a little longer. But she did, and her reply burned through me like acid. "We're on vacay. Can you not stress us with random stuff, Ren? We'll talk when we're back. The X." That was it. No punctuation, no warmth, no acknowledgement that I was her husband's mother. Just a cold dismissal like I was a telemarketer. I sat there, holding the phone, rereading the message over and over, and with each word, my chest tightened. My hands went still. My tea cooled on the counter, forgotten. They were on vacay, paid for with my future, and I was the stressor? I thought back to the years I held that family together with my bare hands. When David and Mandy were between jobs, who paid their rent? When the kids were sick, who drove 2 towns over with chicken soup and Tylenol? When Mandy had her gallbladder surgery, who stayed up all night on their couch so she could sleep? Me. And now, I was an inconvenience. I put down the phone and walked into the spare bedroom. That's where I keep the old boxes, the ones filled with papers from my husband's death, my pension letters, tax returns, and the account folder where I tracked every dime in that retirement fund. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. There, tucked between receipts and statements, was a Mother's Day card David had made when he was 10. It was hand-drawn, sloppy but sweet. "To the best mom in the world, when I'm rich, I'm going to buy you a castle." That little boy had vanished. Somewhere along the way, the love turned into entitlement. Maybe it was my fault. I gave too much. I never said no. I wanted to be needed so badly after my husband died that I let myself be used. But no more. Not now. Not after that text. So I brewed another pot of tea, not for comfort, but for courage. I picked up the phone again, but this time, not to text. I called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the other end asked for my name, account number, and the reason for my call. I told her everything. I told her I was no longer authorizing any usage on that card, that the people using it had not informed me of the full extent of their spending, and that I felt coerced into giving access under false pretenses. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "We can lock it immediately. Are you sure?" I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, "Yes." And in that moment, something settled inside me. Not revenge, not victory, just relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being quiet, so others could take what they wanted. I was finally saying no, and they wouldn't hear it, until it was too late. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from worry, those days were done, but from clarity. There's a strange stillness that settles in your chest once you've made a decision that can't be undone. I sat in my old recliner, wrapped in a crocheted blanket I made back when my hands were stronger, my eyes sharper. The house was dark, except for a dim lamp and the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I waited for morning. At exactly 8:02 a.m., I called the bank again. A different woman answered this time. Calm, patient sounding. I gave her my details and said, I'd like to freeze all activity on my retirement card, effective immediately. She asked, would you like to place a temporary hold or file for unauthorized use? I leaned back and said quietly, I'm filing it. They misused my name, booked a vacation in my name, and charged things they never told me about. She asked if it was stolen. I said, no. Worse. It was taken for granted. There was a silence on the line. I think she understood, more than her job allowed her to say. I confirmed the charges and told her every purchase after the hotel was without my clear knowledge or approval. Then I said something I never thought I'd hear myself say. I am willing to file a formal dispute and go on record. They used me, and I won't be used again. She paused before replying. We'll proceed with flagging the account and marking all new transactions. If anyone tries to use the card again, it will be declined, and an alert will be sent. I thanked her, hung up, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Then I did something even harder. I called the airline. A polite young man answered. How can I help you today, Miss McKinley? I explained the situation, that my son and his family had booked their return flight under my name, my loyalty points, my card, and my ID attached to the booking. But I wasn't travelling. He clicked away for a while, then said, Yes, the return flight tomorrow lists you as the primary ticket holder. You're not travelling? No, I said firmly. I never intended to, and I do not give permission for anyone to fly under my name. There was a long pause. Ma'am, we take identity-based travel fraud seriously. We'll need to verify who is actually boarding this flight. If the name doesn't match the ID, or if the booking was done under false information, it may result in detainment or denial of boarding at customs. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent. I didn't approve this. He responded, Understood. We'll flag the reservation. You may receive a follow-up from airport security or customs. After the call, I stood up from the chair and walked into the kitchen. The kettle was still warm from earlier. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea. And I waited. There was no anger in me anymore. Only a quiet anticipation, because I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to reclaim something they didn't even know they'd taken. My dignity. I had been invisible for years, swallowed in the background of their lives. The babysitter, the cleaner, the emergency fund, the woman who lived alone and could always help. They never asked if I could afford it. They just assumed I didn't need anything for myself. But now they were flying on a ticket that wasn't theirs, with names they didn't earn, on credit they hadn't built. And the moment that plane touched, down, someone in uniform would be waiting with questions they wouldn't have answers for. Because this time, they wouldn't be hiding behind my silence. This time, my absence would be the loudest thing in the room. The call came the next afternoon. It was from an unknown number, foreign, unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer, but something in me knew. I held the phone to my ear and said, Hello? A woman spoke, her voice clipped, professional, serious. Mrs. Dorothy McKinley? Yes. This is Officer Ramirez with Airport Customs and Border Protection at Cancun International Airport. I'm calling to inform you that a party attempting to board a flight using your name and financial credentials has been detained for verification. I closed my eyes. They said they're your family, she continued, but there's a discrepancy between the names on the booking and the identification presented at check-in. She paused, giving me space to speak. I didn't rush. I simply said, They are not authorized to travel in my name. Another pause. Thank you for confirming. We'll proceed accordingly. That was it. No drama, no yelling, just a moment of pure, unshakable stillness. I hung up and set the phone down on the table like it was made of glass. Then I looked around my house. Everything was quiet. But I imagined the scene unfolding thousands of miles away. David and Mandy standing there, confused, irritated, red-faced. David, trying to talk his way through it, insisting, "It's my mum's name. She let us use her account." Mandy, arms crossed, huffing in disbelief. "This is a misunderstanding. We were just helping her use her points." But customs doesn't deal in misunderstandings when the paperwork doesn't line up. The return flight had been booked using my name, my ID, and my points. And now, since I had withdrawn permission and flagged the card, it triggered automatic review. They were held for hours, questioned, required to provide full explanations. And the final sting? They were told they could not board the flight unless they rebooked under their own names, using their own payment methods, and not the frozen card that was now useless. They had to buy new tickets at airport pricing. Expensive. Last minute. No loyalty points. No upgrades. They missed their scheduled flight. Their luggage was delayed. The kids were tired, hungry, confused. They called me. Twice. I didn't answer. I let it ring, then go silent. Because for once, the silence wasn't mine to carry. The second time they called, I stood in my kitchen, folding laundry slowly as the ringtone echoed from the phone on the counter. I watched it flash, and I let it die. They left a voicemail. "Mum, it's David. This is really serious. We're stuck. I don't know what happened, but please, just call me back. Please. Mandy's freaking out." He sounded small, panicked. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I didn't. Because I remembered all the times I'd been left to clean up their messes, the tears I'd hidden, the bills I'd paid, the dignity I swallowed, again and again, so they wouldn't feel discomfort. Now, for once, they had to face the discomfort themselves, and I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to argue. All I did was tell the truth, that they weren't me, and they had no right to pretend otherwise. That night, I slept. Not well, but deeply, like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. They came back on a Tuesday. It was just after noon. The sun was high, the air still. I was trimming the rose bushes out front, careful not to bend too much at the waist. I saw the car pull up and knew before they even stepped out, that entitled hum of the engine, the careless slam of the doors. David walked ahead, Mandy trailing behind. Both of them looked tired, tanned, but tight in the jaw, like their smiles had melted on the tarmac. They didn't even glance at each other. I didn't move from my spot in the garden. I kept trimming. "Mum," David started. His voice wasn't soft. It wasn't angry either. It was the voice of a man who couldn't believe the help he expected had dared to draw a boundary. Mandy folded her arms. "We need to talk, now." I stood up slowly, leaned on my shears and looked them over. Their vacation had left them burned, not just from the sun. David took a step forward. "What the hell was that, Mom? You embarrassed us. You humiliated us. In front of our kids." My eyes didn't flinch. "Did you explain to them whose name was on the card? On the ticket? On the hotel bookings?" He blinked. "It wasn't like that." "Oh, but it was," I said. Mandy rolled her eyes. "You acted like we stole from you. We were going to pay you back. We've been through a lot lately and you made it 10 times worse." I took a deep breath. "Did you ever intend to tell me how much you spent?" David's mouth opened, then closed. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Or that I wouldn't care because I'm old and alone and quiet? He looked away. I didn't freeze that card because I wanted revenge. I froze it because I finally realized, after 67 years of saying yes, that you only remember me when I can be used. Mum, that's not fair, David began. What's not fair is using my name like it was a free pass, I snapped. What's not fair is spending thousands of dollars I worked decades to save, while I sat in a cold kitchen hoping you'd send a picture. What's not fair is being treated like a burden unless you need me. Mandy muttered under her breath. This is ridiculous. I turned to her. Do you know what ridiculous is? It's a grown woman texting her husband's mother to stop stressing her with a question about sending her grandkids a gift. It's standing in my garden now, angry that your vacation ended with consequences. David stepped forward, tone shifting. Okay. Look, we messed up. But can we just talk inside? The kids are at home and we don't want to argue in the street. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw someone I didn't recognize, a man who had learned to take more than he gave. I walked inside, came back with a manila envelope, and handed it to him. Inside was a full printout of the bank transactions. I'd highlighted the charges. I'd written dates and totals. I'd even attached a small sticky note. Pay in full by the 10th. If not, the account goes to collections and fraud proceedings begin. He stared at it, stunned. I'm your mother, I said, but I'm not your doormat, and I'm done being your credit card. Mandy scoffed. You're really going to ruin the family over money? I smiled. Number you already did. Then I walked up to the front door, and before David could say another word, I closed it, softly, deliberately, not in anger, but in peace, the kind of peace that only comes when you finally choose yourself. 2 months passed. David didn't call. Mandy didn't text. The money never came. At first I thought I might feel regret, that little voice inside, the one that whispers, you should have just let it go, tried to crawl back in. But I didn't let it stay long. Because every time I walked past my mailbox, I saw the manila folder with copies of those charges. I'd posted a reminder on my fridge with the words, this was not love. This was theft wrapped in family ties. The bank processed my fraud claim. The investigation started. I gave my statement, printed my messages, even forwarded that nasty little text from Mandy. They told me it might take a while. I said I'd waited long enough already. Meanwhile, I went back to my life. The quiet life I used to resent suddenly felt like a gift. I baked more, read more, took longer walks. The sun started warming up the garden again, and the birds returned to the feeder outside my kitchen window. And one morning, when the light hit my face just right and the coffee brewed just the way I liked, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the kind you chase in airports or resorts. The kind that settles in your chest when you know you're no longer being used. That very afternoon, I opened my laptop. Not to check the bank, not to track charges, but to plan something for myself. I'd heard about a small seniors group that did guided trips. Nothing extravagant, just simple, peaceful places where folks walked through flower gardens, listened to ocean waves, and shared stories over tea. I booked it, paid in full. In my name. With my card. A 5-day retreat on the Oregon coast, ocean view. Breakfast included. A porch with rocking chairs and other women who'd seen too much and decided it was time to start living. No one needed to approve it. No one could take it from me. I packed a modest suitcase, 2 sweaters, a sun hat, and a book I'd been meaning to finish since my husband passed. I didn't need anyone's permission anymore. At the airport, I smiled as I passed through security. The attendant said, "Enjoy your trip, ma'am." And I did. I sat by the window on the plane, sipping ginger ale, watching the clouds roll by like soft hills below me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I felt light. Later, on the second day of the retreat, I sat on the wraparound porch with a woman named Elsie. She was 72 and full of quiet wisdom. She asked why I came alone. I told her, "Because I waited too long for someone else to value me. Now I'm learning to do it myself." She patted my hand and said, "That's the bravest kind of journey there is." We watched the waves crash against the shore. In my lap was a postcard. Not one I'd sent, but one I'd received. It was from my daughter, my youngest. The one who'd moved away years ago and grown distant after David pulled the family close around him like a shield. She'd heard what happened. Somehow, word got around. Her message was simple. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. The boys miss you. Can we visit soon? Love, Emily." And beneath that, 2 tiny crayon hearts drawn by my grandsons. I folded the postcard and tucked it into my journal. No, I hadn't lost everything. I'd only lost the parts that never loved me back. And in their place, I found something far more lasting. My voice, my peace, myself. They flew on my name. But I found my wings when I stopped waiting for their permission. And this time, the view was all mine.